Let's move to a workplace issue. A Reddit user recently asked other employers, what's the worst way a candidate messed up a job interview with your company? Some of the employers revealed that applicants had turned up with one of their parents, some of whom had tried to sit in on the meeting. Not encouraging. One employer said that a guy brought drugs to the interview. The guy dropped a bag of meth while taking something else out of his pocket in an interview. Another candidate showed up drunk. So you got these extreme problems at a job interview, but what are the things that will make it a deal breaker for you when you're at a job interview? What are the cool things that you need to be doing at a job interview? Well, let's consult somebody who does know about this. He is workplace expert Jim Whiddon, and he is on the WHO Newsmakers line. Jim, thanks very much for joining me. Good morning to you.
Hi, Jeff. It's my pleasure.
Let me go to the positives first when we're talking about this. Going to a job interview is very stressful. Million thoughts are going through your mind about how you can stand out, how you can impress an employer. What do you think are some of the key things a person needs to know?
Well, the first thing is don't lie. The article talked about 66% of employers see that as a deal ender. Now, what I couldn't believe is that it's not 100%.
Right.
So I guess,
that's a great point, Jim. 66% of employers in this article I was reading from said they're concerned about a candidate caught lying, which means that 34% were like, eh.
Yeah, one in three have lying as a corporate value.
Ooh, okay.
That's hard to believe. Yeah.
Hard to believe.
But the ones that are easy, look, put your phone away, leave it in the car, leave it in your briefcase, your purse, whatever you've got, just leave it out of the way. And then dress is so easy. All you got to remember is red, white, and blue. So if you have any patriotism at all, remember red, white, and blue. Navy always works. A red scarf or a red tie, and then a white blouse or shirt or a light blue blouse or shirt. Then there's no chances taken, and you're good on the dress. So those are just some real high-level fundamental things. But, Warren Buffett talks about this. I saw a quote about this the other day, and he's done pretty well for himself. He says integrity, intelligence, and energy. And if they don't have the first one, integrity, then the other two will kill you. He said you better hope that they are stupid and lazy if they have don't have integrity, because they're going to really hurt your organization. So that's how important the character aspect of it is. And you need to be able to allow that to shine through if you're the interviewee, if you're the candidate. And if you're the interviewer, the one asking the questions initially, you need to know what to look for in terms of is there character integrity here?
Let me ask you, Jim, this seems like such a fine line when you're doing a job interview. You want to be able to tout yourself, but you don't want to appear arrogant. Where's the fine line in that?
Well, one thing you want to include, if it is certainly in your history, is what were the bad or, the old dirty jobs. You've seen that series with Mike Rowe.
Right, yeah.
What did you do early in life that everybody knew you were going to probably stay with that? It's just something that you were willing to get in and get your hands dirty. That tells people a lot about you. So don't be embarrassed to include that, because employers actually like to see that. I mean, my kids have heard about my toilet cleaning in an office building at age 12 for $2.05 an hour. They've heard that story 100 times. But I'm trying to instill ideals and character when I tell them that.
Yeah.
Also, mix in stories. See, you can tell stories about yourself or about your experiences, and that allows you not to come across as touting yourself or arrogant. A genuine story, rehearsed, mind you, but still genuine and true, goes a long way as a candidate. And the interviewers love to hear those, too, because that's a skill that they know will be used within their organization. If you're a good storyteller, you can go a long ways in life.
Jim, you raised such an important point. You said, tell a story and make sure that you've rehearsed it, because I often think that someone is listening to a segment like this and they get very frustrated because they go, I'm not naturally a storyteller, or I'm really worried about that. I'm an introvert. I don't, I'm worried about that. And you're saying you can practice this stuff for an interview, correct?
Oh, absolutely. In my book, The Old School Advantage, Chapter 6 is completely devoted to the interview for both sides, both the candidate and the interviewer. However, Chapter 5, right before that, is completely devoted to storytelling. In other words, that's the order of importance. So storytelling is a learned skill, and it doesn't take long to be pretty darn good at it. To reach 80% proficiency literally within a few hours or a day or two. So I think it's absolutely critical to be able to communicate. They're sticky. When I listen to a story about your grandmother, I'm thinking about my grandmother, so they're very connective, if you will. There's just not much that can go wrong with a good story.
Let me go back to the lying aspect, which is the big deal breaker for at least 66% of employers. But is there a way, thinking about it from an employer perspective, Jim, is there a way an employer can start to suspect that an interviewee is lying?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, there's some intuition. I mean, there's actually a book called Lying, which allows you to have some ideas about what people do when they lie. It's not completely scientific,
right,
but I think it is. I think it is useful. I mean, obviously, social media, technology allows people to be checked up on. It's amazing. What employers need to recognize is that the big lie exists. In other words, what people will do is they'll tell a lie so big you would never think it's a lie.
Oh, because nobody would have the gall to do that.
Exactly. That's why the big lies work so well. That'd be a great segment in a political talk show, by the way, because that's what politicians unfortunately know, the concept that I just mentioned. But a big lie, of course, is I have a degree from MIT when I've never even, been 100 miles, within 100 miles of MIT, or I have this work experience, or perhaps I'm going to hide a 3-year period when, if you called that boss, they probably wouldn't say good things about me. So, some are more subtle. Some are just bold and big because they feel like they're so bold and big, no one would ever think I'm lying. So you need to be aware of that if you're an employer.
And let me ask you, you're visiting with people in the workplace, Jim. When we have a competitive job market, and we do right now here in Iowa, there's more jobs than there are people right now, and we'd like people to come in and start interviewing. But if people are really competing for a job, is there that temptation? What I'm trying to say to you is the lying getting worse in our society than it was before as people become more and more competitive for a position?
Well, and that's a great question, Jeff. And on the other side of that, I think when you have the supply and demand balance the way it is, I heard you say there's more jobs than candidates. Is that correct? Well, then the employers are the ones that are a little bit desperate. And so they may be tempted not to ask questions that might catch people in the lie because, frankly, they don't want to hear the answer. Does that make sense? Yeah,
it makes a lot of sense. I hadn't thought about it, but that does make sense.
And so that's how some lies kind of get past the goalie. They don't even want to hear about it, so they may not even ask the question.
Right.
If it gets too competitive. So it's a very interesting dynamic. A lot of psychology involved, obviously.
Absolutely. So is there anything else, Jim, that you've seen in our workplace culture at this particular point? Let's go from two different angles. One, any other deal breakers that you've heard about or seen in interviews? And then I'll follow up with asking you, what's the most important thing?
Well, there's two other deal breakers. If at the end of the interview, an interviewer asks you as a candidate, do you have any questions for me? Which they nearly always will.
Yes.
If you say no, or if you give a canned question to that, when can I start? What's the salary? I mean, these kinds of questions are deal breakers. And those are all in my book, The Old School Advantage. So you need to have, we give you 14 questions to ask. That's called the reverse interview. In other words, they've kind of given you the ball, your turn to run with it. And you can knock that out of the park if you ask them the right questions. Because what a lot of people don't understand, especially younger folks, they don't understand that it's the content and the quality of the questions you ask in life that tell people who you are and how much you know. It's not intuitive. Our intuitive reasoning tends to think it's the statements that we make that tell people how much we know. But in fact, that's not the case. That's why questions we're so painstaking on questions in Chapter 4. It's so important. So that's one. If you don't ask the right questions. Here's another one. If they ask you, hey, what are you reading? And you have no answer, or you stumble over that, and you say something like Shakespeare, which they probably not going to be a lie, because that's the only author you can think of at the moment. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I would at least have some popular authors in my mind to go in, so you could talk about that cogently.
Yeah.
Better yet, have read something in the near past, so that you can come across as somebody that, because what they're looking for three things. They're looking for somebody that can communicate, that is coachable, and that loves to learn. If you can find a candidate like that, you're going to be able to mold them into whatever you need in terms of a great employee.
That's Jim Whiddon, and his book is called The Old School Advantage, and that is just some fascinating insight this morning. Jim, appreciate you and appreciate the time you took. We'll talk to you again soon.
You bet. Let's do it. Take care.